Welcome to the Transformative Principal podcast, where we learn how to be an amazing educational leader. I am your host, Jethro Jones. Are you ready to be a transformative principal? I'm looking for about 10 people who are ready to do what it takes to lead with integrity, find balance, and take your school to the next level. If you're looking to improve your leadership in a measurable way, go to transformativeprincipal.org/mastermind to see if you qualify to join a group of like-minded people who are ready to be the best principals in the country. Welcome to Transformative Principal. I am excited to have Derek Rhodenizer on the podcast today. He is a principal out in Ottawa, Canada, and principal to bilingual school, and I'm excited to talk with him about his office as a learning space. So what we're going to talk about is how he has developed and designed his office to be more of a learning space for his students. I really want to say thank you to those of you who are listening. This podcast is something that I just love doing, and it helps me immensely, and I hope that it helps you. And I'm just really grateful for you listening and being part of this. If you'd give a shout out on Twitter or leave a review in the iTunes store, that would mean a lot. And just thank you so much for being a part of the Transformative Principal. Welcome to Transformative Principal. I am super excited to have Derek Rhodenizer on the podcast today. He is a principal in Canada, and I love my Canadian friends, so I'm really excited to be talking to him. Derek, thanks so much for being a part of the podcast, and welcome to Transformative Principal.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm pretty excited. It's snowing here. We've got 5 centimeters on the ground.
Yowzas. Well, it is not snowing here in Kodiak. It is raining and wet, which is how it usually is. So that's all right. We're good with that. Derek, you also have your own podcast. Do you want to talk a little bit about your podcast and share that with the listeners first?
Yeah, sure. Got a podcast that I started out just last spring. Pretty excited about it. It's going really well. We're calling it Edgy Thoughts. And just recently, actually, I've kind of branched out into 2 different pieces. So the Edgy Thoughts format is we get educators together and just talk and go through sort of the philosophies of education. And it's just kind of like a coffee time chat with educators. And then now I'm also trying another sort under the same umbrella. I'm calling it Edgy Slams. And that's taking one idea, tool, or concept and just sort of taking 5 minutes and really trying to break that down, and a bit more of like a journey through my teaching journey, right? Like my reflection. I don't reflect well on paper, so I'm reflecting audioly instead.
Cool. That sounds like a good way to go. I used to blog and struggled a ton with it, and still have a blog, but just don't post there as much. And doing a podcast is a much better way for me to do it, because I like to talk and like to ask people questions. So this is a good format for me too.
Yeah, that's how my podcast came around too. Is I get the idea of blogging. I understand it. I think it makes a ton of sense. And it sounds like a lovely way to reflect. And I bought DerekRhodenizer.ca and I tried to put a bunch of stuff in it. It was painful for me, the format. And so I tried to take a page out of what we do as teachers and differentiate it for myself. And so, well, why can't I do that without writing? And then that's where the podcast came from.
Yeah, very cool. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you on this podcast today is about your recent EduSlam that you did, which was about your principal's office as a learning space. Can you talk a little bit about that idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the hot topics in education right now is this idea of not having classrooms, right? Having learning spaces, and that we can create these spaces to support students. And I think there's even a book called A Third Teacher, right? If there's a teacher, and then there's the students teaching each other, and then there's that classroom providing that support and being that third teacher. And so I was wondering about that and thinking about my office. And like one of the things that I've always tried to do as a principal and as a vice principal is get out of my office, right? Try to make sure that I'm in the classrooms and in the halls and just be a part of what's going on around me. But then I kind of realized that I was neglecting my space itself and wasn't sort of giving that space the time that it deserved. And while, of course, we can agree that the main learning space is going to be the classroom, there's lots of learning spaces in the school, right? You're going to learn in the library, you're going to learn in the hallways, and we spend time on those things, right? We put bulletin boards in the hallways, and we We create our libraries in different ways so that they're more interactive, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the big learning places, I think, is in the principal's office. And whether that be, a constructive, difficult conversation that a student has to have with principal or vice principal, or whether that be, a hooray conversation, congratulations, you did this so well, or whatever it may be, there's lots of things happening in the principal's office, but we're not necessarily giving it that same sort of attention. So I was trying to look at my office as a learning space and what I can do to support that. So that's been my sort of battle this year. I'm in a new position. I'm at a new school. I'm in a new space. So do you want to talk about things that I've done in it to try to do that?
Yeah. Well, before we get there though, I want to talk about why thinking of the principal's office as a learning space actually matters, because I think that taking that approach of this is a place for people to come in and learn is really powerful. And I don't think that is what we see it as. And so I'm going to ask you about the things you do, but also push our listeners to think about what kinds of things they're doing and how they can reframe that thought. So Why does it matter that it's a learning space and not just another office? How does that change things when you're interacting with people and they come in and you describe it as a learning space?
Right. Well, one thing, I was a VP for 6 years, and the joke at cocktail parties is everyone hates the VP, right? Because the VP tends to be the disciplinary arm, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's okay. But it is real. So what happens is there's a problem in a classroom, and let's say it gets to the point where the teacher needs a little bit of extra support, and then the child comes to me or to whoever. That's just a continuation of the situation, right? That learning is still happening, a very structured learning is still happening where that child is having a real challenge in their primary learning space and they have to go to a different spot to talk with a different person. So it's not that learning stopped and now discipline starts. That's not productive at all. The idea is that when they're walking out of that office and heading back to their classroom, that something productive has happened. They've come to a realization. They've learned a quick lesson. They've done something that has supported what they needed so that they can move on with their day, right? So it's just another learning space is kind of the philosophy that I've taken on that one.
Yeah, so I think that is really powerful, that it's an extension of the situation in the classroom if it's a disciplinary interaction, but you're giving them a tool or a strategy or help in being able to continue on with their day. I think that is really, really powerful to say. So talk about some of the things that you've done to make your office a learning space.
Right, absolutely. And I also want to throw in there that one of the things I try to encourage my teachers is that it's not like you've tried X, Y, Z, it failed, and now you failed, and now you got to pass it to me. It's a team thing, right? So I'm a part of that team. I'm another tool that the teacher can use, and so I like this idea that it's this learning space that has, I say, constructive instead of negative, right? So it's not that discipline. I'm trying to have these constructive, difficult conversations, or whether these positive, congratulations conversations, and that's just another tool in the teacher's toolbox that they can use, and we can work together. So if you come into my office, here's what you'll find. I've set up a camera space. So I have a camera mounted permanently on my wall with a microphone, and it's lined up directly to a whiteboard. And so I use that as a communications tool with parents and teachers. I do a lot of videos. We're in a bilingual school, and it's nice for me to communicate bilingually. Audially, English and French is a lot easier than in the written form. So I will make little videos, updates for the teachers. I'll make videos for parents about activities going on in the school. And I'm also working right now, haven't done one yet, but the goal right now is to do little tutorials for parents, like how to do guided reading or how to do homework or things like that, so they can go into my YouTube channel and get some of those sorts of things. So just in setting up that permanent audio and visual creation space, a little bit of a photo booth type thing, it makes it a lot easier for me. And then that is also extended into others. So I have teachers coming in and using it, right? So my learning space is kind of interesting because it's not just for kids, but also for teachers, right? So I have them coming in and using it, and the Students' Council might use it as well. So that's one. I also have a whiteboard on sort of half my wall, which often is being used as my to-do list, but also is as a spot where I can get messages from people. People can let me know what they need to know in a different way. Sometimes emails get lost. If it's in big red letters on my whiteboard from a teacher, I know it has to happen, right? And also it allows for visuals during conversations. So my table, my little table that I have for meeting is right beside that whiteboard. So if a teacher or a student or myself needs to sort of create a visual representation of what they're saying, it's really easy to pick up the marker and go on the whiteboard. It kind of flows naturally, and you can draw out what happened in the schoolyard. You can show me what you mean when this person bumped into you or that sort of thing. So it's just another visual piece. And then my last thing, which is sort of the EduSlam that I did, is this Lego wall. And so I did a video of the Lego wall and then sped it up times 20 because it took me about an hour to build. And it's new. So I built it just 2 days ago. And it's a little Lego wall, 4 feet by 3 feet. And I've got it next to my desk. And so when I built the thing, I built it during the day. I used some construction adhesive and some duct tape to stick it on and let it cure for the day. Come the end of the day, I already had this. It already worked. And it was a really great tool for me. I was finishing it off and I was doing a little designing, and I got a phone call from a teacher, and there was a child who was just having a bad afternoon. And they were in the hallway and they were sort of covering their head and not talking to the teacher and not looking at the teacher and not responding and just being a complete distraction and really, really having a tough go. And so they called me in, which is great. So traditionally I would go in, I would sort of spend some time talking to the student and bring them to my office, and then we would continue the conversation and go from there. But with this tool, I was able to walk up and say, I have a Lego wall in my office. Do you want to try it? And bam, the student was up with me, came in, no problem, sat down. I put the egg timer out. I got a little egg timer, gave him 3 minutes, built him a Lego wall for 3 minutes, and then we were having a constructive conversation. It was amazing. And like, if you do the math on that time, it was really fast. Like you might feel like, oh, the kids are going to play Lego. Well, yeah, it took me, I was able to recenter that child and have them focused on a productive conversation in 3 minutes. Good luck doing that, to just talking to them in the hallway, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was the sort of big, like that was the main sort of reason to have it, is that refocus thing. Like you're super energetic or super high on whatever. Something has happened, something makes you really angry, and this could give you a quick outlet. You don't have to look at me. You don't have to talk about it. You can just clear your brain for a second, and then we can talk. That was sort of the main focus. I also find that some people, when you're talking to them, they just need to fidget or do something. And so I'm wondering if that might be supportive. And I've already had 2 teachers come in this morning, and while they were talking to me, they were building on the Lego wall. So so far it's going real well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to break down each of those things and talk a little more in depth about them. But let's start with the Lego wall. If you go back to Transformative Principal, like episode 20 or 21, somewhere around there when I interviewed Chris Weeger, I shared my strategy of having a bouncy ball in my pocket so that when I got to those kids who were dysregulated, I could start bouncing the ball back and forth with them. I got to tell you, that was incredible. It's amazing what happens when you provide a little bit of distraction from whatever they're feeling. And, you know, I can just imagine having a kid who's struggling in a classroom and say, do you want to go build on the Lego wall? I mean, yes, please. There's like no hesitation there at all, I'm sure. So when you decided to do the Lego wall, obviously you had a plan to help these kids, but what are some other ways that this can be beneficial? You talked a little bit about teachers fidgeting with it when they're talking to you, but what other things do you see being beneficial from it?
One thing that was interesting is, so I'm the kind of person that I get excited by new and different ideas. Some people get sort of cautious and do their research. I get excited and then I do my research, right? So I think I was talking about Lego walls in my first staff meeting here, and I got a bunch of sideways glances. And now 3 months in, I'm building one. So if you watch the video that I did, and it's sped up 20 times, but you'll notice there's about 8 teachers that pop up and pop in and pop out of the frame, like even just building it. I spent an hour. I sat down and I built it. And a bunch of people came in and were talking to me, and I had some really good conversations, not about Lego walls, about other educational stuff. And sometimes I think people are a lot more productive in their conversations when there is something else going on, right? To stand across the table, to sit down at a table and look at each other in the eye and talk is, well, it's certainly valuable, but not always easy. Right? Sometimes it's a little bit easier to have something in between, right? You have good conversations while you're watching a hockey game or while you're playing cards, or like these are the sorts of things that happen. And I sort of noticed that happening while I was building it, which I hope will extend and continue with, like I say, with the fidgeting while I'm talking on the wall. The other thing with teachers is that modeling piece, right? So I think modeling what we do as administrators is so important. When I send my updates to my staff, I try, let's say I'm going to provide a new type of, a new tool. So I'm a big fan of screencasting. I think it's really cool. And I think it works really well to deliver content. And so I'm not going to send an email saying teachers should use screencasting. I'm going to send a screencast, right? And I got to explain in the screencast this tool and how it works and why I like it and whatever. So me modeling that tool, one for shows the tool, and the other it shows that I value it and I've taken some time to try it to make sure it works. The more frustrating as a teacher for an administrator to throw a solution at a problem that they don't know about, right? If I haven't tried that solution and I'm throwing it at you, it's not fair. Or if I'm asking you to use a tool that I don't have the time to use, then why do you have the time to use it, right? So that modeling thing, I've already had 3 teachers now ask me if they can put a Lego wall in their room because they saw what happened the other day, right? It's only 2 days.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you have these opportunities to share these things, I think the real power comes in you being able to model it like you were saying. I really like that. In my office, I've got these little pieces of sea glass that my daughter found on the beach here, and she gave them to me when she came and had lunch with me at my office. And I just left them in there. And while we were there eating lunch, when she gave them to me, she and I started stacking them and seeing if we could stack these pieces of sea glass on top of each other and make a little tower out of them. And that small, simple thing led to me having a piece of paper that they sit on with the question, can you stack these? And so that's on the table in my office. So when people come in, then it's an invitation. Can you stack these? And so people stack them while we're talking. And what's fun is that I know they can all be stacked, and I took a picture of it to prove it, but they're really hard to get there. And it took us a long time to figure it out. But that one little thing is an invitation to do something. And you talked about the invitation to start drawing on your whiteboard. And, you could have put your table in a different location, but you chose to put it by the whiteboard so that people could easily draw. How has that improved your communication and the learning that's happening in your office?
I think that is really important, taking away that ownership or giving ownership. I really tried not to own my office too much. Easy things like not closing the door, but I encourage people to draw on my board. I encourage people to build on the Lego board. I was out of the office yesterday for an hour, and I came back and nothing had changed in my office. And I immediately went to the staffer and said, "Hey, I was gone and no one built on my Lego wall. Come on." Just making sure that everybody knows they have permission. And I think with that, you see so much more collaboration, right? I mean, we've seen that shift, or hopefully we've seen that shift in most classrooms, where I remember it used to be the way that the teacher held the whiteboard marker or the chalk, and the students certainly didn't. And they were the ones who received the information, not the ones who helped create it. And that's not really the case anymore, right? You walk into a class and you see students holding the whiteboard markers and students creating content and getting involved. And of course, obviously that empowers them and that makes the environment more rich. And if we can, and I think that's what makes a good learning space. So if my office is a learning space, and it should be the same thing. I mean, sure, I have my OSRs locked. I'm not giving everyone the opportunity to go into my filing cabinet, but they can absolutely use my space, right? And to empower people to do that allows that collaboration piece to happen more effectively, I think. And it is a team. I don't know these students as well as the teachers. It's just not possible. I get around and I get to know the kids as best as I can. I know all their names. I try to interact as much as I can. But those students are with those teachers more than they are with their parents. The teachers know them really well. So it's important to make sure that we're a cohesive team and they can come and be part of this space as well.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point as well. One of the really powerful things there is giving that ownership away just makes it so much easier for teachers to do that, like you were saying about modeling it. I love that idea and think that is incredibly powerful. So I'm really glad you shared that. One thing. Well,
I mentioned people writing on big red block letters. My report card system was down. Internet had an issue, and somebody came and wrote in big red block letters on my whiteboard, "It's down," and that didn't anger me at all, because now I know. And it was very clear, and I solved the problem, and off I went. But as I was doing that, I was imagining how that would I could imagine that bothering somebody, right? I can imagine you coming in and someone's done that to your office. You might feel frustrated, or might feel like they were expressing frustration, but it was really they needed that. They needed that report card system. It was down. They told me in a way that was very clear. I certainly had no question about it. I solved the problem. Perfect, right? Like, there's no reason to get upset about these sorts of things, and let's encourage the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very awesome. So that was a great interview with Derek Rhodenizer. I really enjoyed that, and we talked a little bit about some of the things he's doing. We're going to come back next week and continue the conversation. We're going to talk about his audiovisual recording studio and how any principal could start doing that. So once again, I just want to say thank you for listening to the Transformative Principal. I really enjoyed doing this, and I hope that you find it beneficial, and I know I certainly do. So thank you so much. And this episode marks the third year that I've been doing this, and what an exciting time to look back and see all the amazing things that I've learned. So at this point of reflection, I just want to say thank you for making this podcast a success and a powerful way for people to learn and become better at what they do. So thank you. Transformative Principal is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators by educators. Visit edupodcastnetwork.com for more great podcasts.